Imagine, like a dark, wood-paneled office. Cigarette smoke is just hanging heavy in the air, catching the light from a desk lamp.
Right. Very cinematic.
Exactly. And there's this guy in a perfectly tailored gray suit. He swirls a glass of scotch, leans across this massive mahogany desk, and delivers a pitch so smooth, so hypnotic, that the client on the other side practically throws their checkbook at him.
Ah, yeah, the classic Don Draper fantasy. I mean, it's the prevailing mythology of the born salesman.
It totally is.
It's this incredibly pervasive cultural trope, This idea that sales is entirely binary. Like you either have the silver tongue and the innate charisma to manipulate reality, or you just don't. And if you don't, well, you're doomed.
Right. It's undeniably seductive. But when it comes to the gritty reality of actually building a company from scratch or even just getting a new initiative off the ground inside a rigid corporation, it is completely spectacularly wrong.
Oh, 100% wrong.
The reality of building something from nothing doesn't look like a 1960s ad agency at all. It looks like a brutal systemic grind.
Yeah, it really does.
So today, our mission on this deep dive is to decode the actual structural forces, the power dynamics, and the global significance of sales, marketing, and product market fit.
Which is going to be fascinating.
I think so too. We are pulling from a massive trove of lectures from top-tier startup accelerators and industry titans. We were stripping away the romance to look at the raw mechanics of convincing people to take a chance on a nobody.
Which is arguably the most vital skill in the modern economy, right?
Absolutely.
We're going to examine the literal physics of product retention and the deep psychological power plays involved in pitching to investors. And the reason this material is so compelling is that the actual rules of this game, the rules that govern how billion-dollar entities are formed, are just entirely counterintuitive.
Yeah, they really are. And I want to say, this isn't just theory for Silicon Valley insiders. If you are listening to this right now, this matters to you. Whether you are pitching a radical new operational initiative to your skeptical boss or, trying to get a B2B software side hustle off the ground in your garage, or if you're just fascinated by how power actually changes hands in the business world, understanding these dynamics is your ultimate cheat code.
It really is the cheat code.
So let's start where every single business, every initiative must absolutely start, getting that very first customer.
The hardest part.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
But right out of the gate, there is this massive misconception about who should actually be doing the selling in those early, fragile days.
Yeah, we have to address the founder fallacy. It's this cognitive trap that ensnares brilliant technical minds constantly.
How does it usually play out?
Well, the internal monologue goes something like this. I'm an engineer, or I'm a product visionary, and I hate the friction of sales. So I'm just going to build a truly great product in isolation. And once the code is perfect, I'll raise some money and hire a professional salesperson, a Don Draper type, to go out and sell it for me.
Oh, that sounds so logical on paper.
It does, but the sources we're analyzing today are aggressively explicit on this point. In the early days, the founder, the actual creator of the idea, is the absolute only viable salesperson.
Wow.
Yeah. If you outsource that function early, you are structurally guaranteeing your own failure.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately because I have to push back on that.
Sure.
If I'm listening to this and I'm a brilliant coder but a terrible public speaker, that sounds like a total death sentence. Why shouldn't I hire someone whose core competency is closing deals? I mean, if I build the engine, why can't I hire someone to drive the car?
That's a great question. But because in the nascent stages of an idea, what you're doing isn't actually sales in the traditional sense.
What is it then?
Two specific things, completely Trump-polished sales experience here, absolute passion for the product, and deep, granular industry knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. A hired salesperson can read a script, they know how to handle objections and maneuver through a procurement department, but they cannot speak with the raw, bleeding conviction of the person who spent the last 2 years staying up until 4 in the morning to build the product.
That's true. You can't fake that kind of passion.
Exactly. And more importantly, the early sales process is actually just a disguised extension of product development. You aren't just trying to get a check, you are trying to figure out why your product is broken.
Oh, I see.
When a prospect tells a hired salesperson no, the salesperson just moves on to the next lead because they're optimizing for a commission check.
Right, they just want the easy yes.
Exactly. But when a prospect tells a founder no, the founder asks why. They dig into the workflow, they uncover the missing feature, they realize their pricing model is entirely backward.
So they're actually learning.
Yes. A hired gun wants to close a deal. A founder needs to understand the foundational flaws in their business model so they can pivot before they literally run out of money.
Okay, that reframes it entirely.
Yeah.
You aren't just selling, you're conducting high-stakes market research,
Hmm.
where the ultimate metric of validation is a signed contract.
Perfectly said.
You're the only one who cares enough to listen to the rejection and actually change the underlying architecture of the product.
Exactly.
But let's look at the mechanics of that rejection, because the math presented in these accelerator lectures is utterly brutal. They lean heavily on Everett Rogers' technology adoption bell curve.
Oh, yeah. That curve is essential to understand.
Right. So if we look at this curve, the vast majority of the market sits in the middle, the early and late majority. But at the very, very tail end of this curve, on the far left edge, you have a group called the innovators.
And they are a tiny sliver.
Right. They make up only 2.5% of the total market.
To understand the power dynamic here, you really have to understand the psychological profile of that 2.5%. Innovators do not buy products because they are safe, or because they have great ROI case studies, or because IBM uses them. Innovators buy products specifically because they are new.
It's a status thing.
Partially status, yeah. They're motivated by the status of being first, or their specific pain point is so excruciatingly acute that they are willing to duct tape an unproven buggy startup product into their workflow just to stop the bleeding.
Which imply the terrifying reality for the other 97.5% of the market.
It really does.
If we assume the innovators are 2.5%, the reciprocal is that 97.5% of the market will absolutely, categorically refuse to take a call from a startup with zero revenue.
Yep.
They are structurally and psychologically wired to reject you. I mean, if I'm a mid-level manager at a Fortune 500 company and I buy software from a startup and the startup goes out of business next month, I might get fired.
Exactly. Your neck is on the line.
But if I buy from Microsoft and it fails, I can just blame Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
The 97.5% are optimizing for risk mitigation, and a startup is pure risk.
That is exactly right. The systemic error founders make is believing that a good pitch can convince a risk-averse late adopter to suddenly behave like a risk-seeking innovator.
And they just can't.
They cannot. You cannot persuade the 97.5% to change their psychological risk profile. You can only find the 2.5%.
So it's like panning for gold.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You aren't trying to act like a wizard casting a spell to convince dirt to turn into gold. You're a prospector. You are just sifting through massive, unimaginable amounts of dirt to find the rare 2.5% of people who are already gold.
Exactly.
People who are already crazy enough to try your unproven product. The burden of persuasion isn't of changing their worldview. It's about finding the people whose worldview already aligns with your unproven solution.
And what's fascinating here, if we look at the psychological resilience required of a founder, is how liberating that statistical reality actually is.
Liberating. How so?
Well, when you internalize that 97.5% of people are mathematically guaranteed to say no, the rejection is entirely decoupled from your self-worth.
Oh, I see.
It's no longer personal. It's not that your pitch was terrible, or your suit wasn't tailored, or your product is inherently flawed. It's just statistical gravity.
That does take the sting out of it a bit.
Right. When you have zero leverage, zero brand recognition, and zero revenue, your only currency is conviction and volume. You just must prospect relentlessly.
Volume is the key word there.
Exactly. The sources detail founders reaching out to 400 different companies in the span of 2 months just to get a tiny handful of initial meetings.
400.
Yeah, 400. You have to willingly subject yourself to an unreasonable, almost inhuman volume of rejection just to run the numbers enough to find that 2.5%.
Let's dwell on that for a second. Reach out to 400 companies in 2 months. That's not just sending a mass BCC email.
No, definitely not.
That is researching 400 specific decision makers, understanding their company's current architecture, writing 400 custom emails, and absorbing the silence or the aggressive "leave me alone" replies day after day. It is an exercise in pure pain tolerance.
It really is. It weeds out a lot of people.
But let's say the statistical gravity finally works. You sift through enough dirt, you find an innovator, and they agree to a 30-minute introductory call. The prospect actually picks up the phone.
A miracle.
Right. So how do you execute that conversation without completely blowing it? Because structurally, We are now shifting from the brute force of finding leads to the nuanced power dynamics of actually navigating a deal.
Right.
And the primary rule of this interaction completely shattered my preconceived notions of what selling actually is. The number one rule of the sales call is to shut up.
Yes, it is codified as the 70-30 rule.
Tell me more about that.
So the data consistently shows that the absolute best salespeople in the world only talk for 30% of the duration of the conversation. They spend 70% of the time actively, strategically listening.
Wow, 70% just listening.
Yeah. Now, contrast this with the natural instinct of a passionate creator. You have just spent 400 cold emails getting someone to talk to you. You are desperate.
You just want to spill everything.
Exactly. You have spent a year building this software. The moment the prospect says hello, the instinct is to talk a mile a minute. You want to verbally assault them with your enthusiasm, listing every single feature, every technical spec, every reason your product is a paradigm shift.
It's the show up and throw up method.
Yeah.
Right? You just vomit information hoping one single feature resonates with them.
Exactly, but that completely misreads the structural power of the interaction. When you are doing all the talking, you are guessing at what they care about. You are throwing darts blindfolded.
Which is a terrible strategy.
There is a fascinating tool mentioned in the source material, Uber Conference, that actually tracks the talk time ratio on sales calls using audio analysis.
Oh, I read about this.
Yeah, and they found that you can practically predict the financial outcome of a deal just by looking at those percentages.
That's wild.
If the founder or the sales rep talked for 80% of the call, they almost universally lost the deal. But if the prospect talked for 70% of the call, the deal was highly likely to close.
So you are essentially creating a vacuum and letting the prospect talk themselves into realizing how badly they need your solution.
Precisely. Because listening gives you the structural power to position your solution.
How does that work in practice?
Well, when a prospect talks for 70% of the time, they are doing something incredibly valuable. They are giving you the exact architectural blueprint of their pain.
Okay, I like that phrasing.
They are telling you, my current software takes 4 hours to generate this report, and my boss yells at me every Friday because it's late. Now, if you had spent the call talking about your software's amazing new UI, you would have lost them. Because they don't care about UI. They care about their boss yelling at them on Friday.
That makes total sense.
By listening, you map their specific pain points. Then, in your 30% of the talk time, you don't pitch the whole product. You simply say, our tool automates that specific report so it's ready on Thursday afternoon. You have positioned your solution precisely where it hurts them the most.
So you aren't selling software, you're selling a Friday without a screaming boss.
Exactly.
But here's the brutal reality check from the accelerator lectures. Even if you execute that call flawlessly, even if the prospect says, this sounds amazing, let's do it, the deal isn't even close to being done.
Not even close.
The sources provided a visual slide detailing the life cycle of a typical B2B sale, and it outlined 60 separate steps just to close one single interested customer. 60 steps. We are talking about unanswered emails, voicemails, follow-up calls, legal reviews, security questionnaires, budget approvals. I think the natural human instinct is to assume that if a prospect doesn't reply to an email after they said they were interested, well, they have changed their mind.
And that is another massive cognitive distortion founders face.
It's so easy to take it personally.
It is. When a prospect doesn't reply to your follow-up email, the founder's internal narrative immediately spirals. They think, oh, they hate the product. They think our pricing is too high. They realized we are just 3 people in a garage.
When in reality,
The prospect just had a server crash, or their kid got sick, or they had a board meeting. They are just busy. The power dynamic of professional persistence requires you to keep following up until you get a definitive binary yes or no.
But how do you navigate 60 touch points without becoming like a stalker?
That's a very fair concern.
Because there is a fine line between professional persistence and harassment. If I email a VP of engineering 14 times asking, just checking in on the contract, they are going to block my domain.
Definitely. And that is where the nuance of value-add persistence comes in. You don't just send 60 emails saying checking in.
What do you say instead?
You use each touch point to incrementally add value and lower their perceived risk.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Follow-up number 4 might be, hey, saw your company just acquired XYZ Corp. Our software handles multi-tenant data merging really well. Here's a one-page case study on that. Let me know when you have time to review the contract.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. And follow-up number 7 might be, I know you were slammed, just wanted to let you know we just released the SOC 2 security compliance report you mentioned your IT team might need.
So you are maintaining momentum without demanding immediate action.
Yes, but you must force a resolution eventually. A definitive no is actually a great outcome for a startup.
Wait, really? A no is a great outcome.
Yes, because it frees up your cognitive load and your bandwidth to go find someone else.
Ah, I see.
A maybe, like a prospect who strings you along for 8 months saying, we are reviewing it, that will bankrupt your company.
Yeah.
Because it drains your time, your emotional energy, and prevents you from hunting for real revenue.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say your persistence pays off. You navigate the 60 steps. You get them to the table. You think the hard part is over. But structurally, this is where the power dynamic flips aggressively against you.
The danger zone.
Exactly. The prospect realizes you are a small startup, desperate for revenue, and they begin to extract concessions. Let's dissect 2 massive company-killing traps that founders fall into at this exact moment. The one more feature trap and the free trial trap.
Oh, these are brutal.
Let's start with the feature trap. Imagine you are selling a workflow management tool to a massive Fortune 500 logistics company. It's a 6-figure deal. It will make your year.
Sounds like a dream.
But then the VP of logistics looks at the product and says, this is 95% perfect. We will sign the $100,000 contract today. If you just pause your roadmap and build this one hyper-specific custom dashboard integration just for our legacy mainframe, what happens?
It is one of the most dangerous shifts in structural power in the entire startup lifecycle.
Why is it so dangerous?
Well, the founder, blinded by the promise of a massive check and the validation of a massive logo on their website, says yes. They tell their engineering team to drop everything and build this custom dashboard.
Which seems logical if you want the 100 grand.
It does, but what the founder doesn't realize is that the customer is inadvertently holding the company hostage. If you agree to build that custom feature, you are no longer building a scalable product company.
What are you then?
You have instantly, accidentally transformed into a boutique consulting firm for that one specific client.
And the mechanism of failure here is terrifyingly subtle.
Yes, it is.
Because you spend 3 months building the custom dashboard.
Yeah.
During those 3 months, your core product stagnates. You aren't fixing bugs for your other users. You aren't building features that the broader market wants.
You're just working for that one VP.
Right. And worst of all, when you finally deliver the custom dashboard to the logistics company, there is a very high probability they will say, actually, our IT department just changed protocols. We don't need this anymore.
Oh, that happens all the time.
Or they'll say, great, now we need these 3 other custom features before we roll it out. You have given them total leverage over your engineering resources.
You really have. And the correct, structurally sound response to the one more feature demand requires immense discipline.
What should the founder say?
The founder must look at the Fortune 500 VP and say, we understand how valuable that dashboard would be for you. However, our product roadmap is focused on the core features that serve our entire user base. We will sign the agreement today based on the product as it currently exists, and if we hear demand for that specific dashboard from a critical mass of other customers, we will prioritize building it.
Wow. You have to be willing to walk away from the $100,000 to save the company.
Exactly.
You have to maintain the integrity of your product roadmap, even when it physically hurts to turn down the cash.
It's painful, but necessary.
But what about the other side of that coin? The free trial trap. This seems so innocuous to me. A customer says, I love it, but we have strict budget controls. Can we just do a 90-day free trial to prove the ROI to my boss before we sign the contract?
Seems reasonable, right?
Yeah. Every software company does free trials, right? Why is this a trap for a startup?
Because a free trial for an enterprise product completely misaligns the risk and the commitment. For a startup with tightly constrained resources, supporting a free trial user is incredibly expensive. It drains your server costs, it eats up your customer support time, and you are dedicating account management resources to someone who has yielded absolutely zero financial commitment.
Oh, right. You're paying to support them while they pay you nothing.
Exactly. And more importantly, look at the psychological mechanism of a free trial. When someone is using a product for free, they have no skin in the game.
Cool.
They haven't spent political capital to get the budget approved. Therefore, at the first sign of friction, the first bug they encounter, or the first time the UI confuses them, they will just abandon the software. They aren't invested in making it work.
So they are essentially auditing your software, looking for flaws to justify not buying it, rather than integrating it into their daily operations.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So how do you maneuver around this without losing the prospect who genuinely just needs a risk mitigation narrative for their boss? I mean, sometimes they really do just need to prove it works.
Right. The pivot the accelerator sources suggest is brilliant in its simplicity and its understanding of corporate psychology.
Okay, lay it on me.
Instead of offering a free trial, you completely change the framing. You tell the customer, we don't do free trials because it requires significant engineering resources to onboard your team properly. We do annual agreements.
But then don't they just say no?
Wait, there's a second part. You say, however, we will include a 30-day opt-out clause in the contract. If you aren't completely happy after 30 days, you can cancel the contract with zero financial penalty.
Oh, wow. That is a masterclass in reclaiming power.
Isn't it?
You are giving them the exact same psychological safety net, the ability to walk away if it doesn't work, but you have completely inverted the power dynamic.
Exactly.
By forcing them to sign the annual contract up front, they have to go through procurement, they have to get budget approval, they have to put their reputation on the line.
They've put skin in the game.
Yes. And once that contract is signed, even with the opt-out clause, human inertia takes over. They are going to push their team to actually use the software and integrate it into their workflow because they want to validate the decision they just made. You transition them from a casual browser to an invested stakeholder.
And you filter out the prospects who are never going to buy in the first place.
How so?
A prospect who genuinely wants to solve their problem will sign the opt-out contract. A prospect who is just kicking the tires will refuse. It saves the startup months of wasted effort.
Okay, let's say you successfully navigate the feature request and the opt-out pivot.
Yeah.
You get the verbal commitment, you send over the PDF of the contract, you are at the finish line.
Almost.
But the sources highlight a deeply ironic phenomenon that happens in the final mile of a deal during the legal redlining phase. This is where lawyers start passing the contract back and forth, arguing over indemnification clauses, liability caps, and jurisdiction.
Oh, the redlining phase. It's a nightmare.
And the irony is this. Founders are inherently incredibly smart, highly driven, deeply analytical people. Yet their own intellect and pride often become the exact weapon that kills the deal. Why do brilliant people self-sabotage over a few paragraphs of legal text?
It is a profound ego trap.
An ego trap.
Yeah. When a brilliant technical founder receives a contract that has been heavily redlined, crossed out, and rewritten by a corporate lawyer at a massive enterprise client, the founder views it as an intellectual debate to be won.
Oh, I can see that.
The founder reads an indemnification clause that shifts liability to the startup, and they think, well, that's logically unfair. I'm going to argue this point.
Because they're used to being the smartest person in the room.
Exactly. So they will get on calls with the corporate counsel. They will trade emails for 3 months, quibbling over the exact phrasing of a limitation of liability clause that carries a 0.001% chance of ever being triggered. They want to prove they are intellectually correct.
And while they are spending 3 months debating the theoretical nuances of corporate law, the startup's burn rate is ticking away.
Ticking down to zero.
They run out of cash, and the company literally dies while waiting to win an argument.
Exactly. The founder forgets the actual objective. The goal in the early days of a startup is not to win a legal debate with a Fortune 500 lawyer.
Right.
The goal is to get reference customers, secure actual revenue, and survive another month. You are a tiny dinghy trying to dock with an aircraft carrier. You do not dictate the terms of engagement.
So what's the advice? Just give up.
The advice from the industry veterans is brutal. Unless a clause literally signs away the intellectual property of your core technology, you swallow your pride, you sign the wildly imperfect one-sided corporate contract, and you move on.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. But you accept the theoretical legal risk because the immediate financial risk of not closing the deal is a 100% guarantee of bankruptcy.
It fundamentally comes down to understanding the absolute scale of the game you are playing. And there's a specific framework the sources use to define this that I think every entrepreneur needs tattooed on their arm. Are you hunting elephants or are you catching rabbits?
Ah, yes. This is a crucial framework for understanding unit economics and survival.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure, it dictates your entire operational structure. You can build a highly successful $100 million business by selling to 1,000 elephants. An elephant is a massive enterprise client paying you $100,000 a year.
Okay, that makes sense.
Alternatively, you can build a $100 million business by selling to 100,000 rabbits. A rabbit is a small business or a prosumer paying you $1,000 a year. Both are entirely valid business models.
But the catastrophic failure mode is when you mix up the tactics. Let's look at the mechanics of this.
Yeah.
If you were hunting elephants, those $100,000 deals, you can afford to fly your founder out to Chicago 3 times.
Oh, definitely.
You can take the VP to expensive steak dinners. You can afford to pay a lawyer $5,000 to negotiate the red lines for 3 months. Because the payoff is massive, the unit economics support a high-friction, high-cost sales cycle.
Right, the math works.
But what happens if you try to use elephant tactics to catch rabbits?
It is a mathematical death spiral.
A death spiral.
Yeah. If you are selling a software subscription for $1,000 a year and a prospect demands 3 custom Zoom demonstrations and then wants their lawyer to redline your standard terms of service and then wants a 90-day pilot program, if you agree to that, your customer acquisition cost will massively exceed the lifetime value of that customer.
Because you've spent so much time and money just trying to get them on board.
Exactly. You might successfully close the deal, but you will have spent $4,000 in time and resources to win $1,000 in revenue. You will literally go bankrupt by closing successful deals. It's terrifying. You can master the 70-30 rule. You can dodge the free trial trap. You can be objectively great at selling and still kill your company because the underlying physics of the deal size are misaligned with your operational motion.
Completely misaligned.
Rabbits must be caught with Net's automated signups, zero-touch onboarding, standard unalterable contracts. Elephants are hunted with spears. You cannot hunt a rabbit with a custom machined spear. It just costs too much.
That's a great analogy.
But let's pivot the lens entirely here, because there is a harsh truth underlying all of this sales psychology. You can be the greatest elephant hunter in the world. You could have the perfect 70-30 talk ratio. You can navigate 60 touch points flawlessly.
Right.
But if the product doesn't actually solve a real bleeding neck problem for the user, you are ultimately just pouring water into a leaky bucket.
Oh, absolutely. All the sales tactics in the world cannot compensate for a fundamentally flawed product. Which brings us to the actual structural forces of product market fit, or PMF. And to define PMF, we first have to tear down one of the most pervasive modern myths in the startup ecosystem.
Yes, we have to address the toxic obsession with growth hacking.
Toxic obsession. That's strong wording.
Well, Paul Graham, one of the most influential figures in the venture capital world, explicitly warns founders against this. In the last decade, there has been an explosion of an entire cottage industry of consultants, agencies, and self-proclaimed gurus selling tricks to artificially inflate user numbers.
Right, I've seen those ads everywhere.
They sell you on viral referral loops, aggressive SEO arbitrage, algorithmic manipulation, and dark UI patterns just to trick people into signing up. And founders love this because it feels like a shortcut. It feels like you can engineer your way around building a good product.
Right, if you just tweak the color of the sign-up button and spam everyone's address book, you'll be the next Dropbox. But Graham's point is that the only real sustainable growth hack, the only one that actually creates enterprise value, is painstakingly building something users genuinely love and then clearly telling them about it.
That is the only way.
If you use a growth hack to drive 1 million people to a mediocre, confusing product, you haven't built a business. You have just accelerated your own failure.
You've just burned your bridges faster.
Right. You've burned through 1 million potential customers who will try your product, hate it, churn out, and never come back. You have exhausted your addressable market at record speed.
Which is why the singular ultimate metric of product market fit isn't user acquisition or website traffic or press mentions. According to Alex Schultz, the ultimate metric is retention.
Okay, let's really visualize this retention curve, because this isn't just a line on a graph. It is the literal systemic gravity of your business ecosystem.
Let's do it.
Imagine a graph. The bottom horizontal axis, the x-axis, is time. Day 1, day 30, day 90, day 365. The vertical y-axis is the percentage of users from a specific cohort who are still actively using your product.
Got it.
When you launch, you acquire 100 users. That's 100% on day 1. Now, over time, that curve is going to drop. People get bored, They switch jobs, they decide they don't need it, the curve slopes downward.
That's natural churn.
Right. If that retention curve continues to drop week after week, month after month, and eventually crosses the x-axis and hits zero, your business is dead. It is a mathematical certainty.
Completely dead.
It doesn't matter if you have a massive marketing budget to keep pouring new users into the top of the funnel. If the bottom of the bucket is completely open, you'll eventually drown in customer acquisition costs.
However, the holy grail of startups is when that curve drops, maybe it drops sharply from 100% down to 40% over the first month, but then it flattens out.
It stops dropping.
Yes. It begins to asymptote parallel to the x-axis.
What does that flat line actually mean for the business?
What that flat line represents is profound. It means that despite the initial churn, a specific core percentage of people, maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 40%, are sticking around forever. They have integrated your product into their daily lives or their critical business workflows. They cannot live without it. That flat line is systemic gravity taking hold. That flat line is the empirical, undeniable proof of product market fit.
Okay, so if the goal is to find that flat line, to find that core group of people who will never leave, how do we choose which market to go after to find them? Because if we connect this to the macro strategies of company building, the advice here is fiercely contrarian.
Very contrarian.
The natural instinct of an ambitious founder is to look at the biggest market possible. They look at a trillion-dollar market like the global commercial real estate market or the international shipping industry, and they do this deeply flawed top-down math.
Oh, the top-down math.
Right. They say the market is $1 trillion. If our startup can just capture 0.1% of this massive market, we will be $1 billion company.
That is precisely the systemic error Peter Thiel identifies when he famously argues that competition is for losers.
Competition is for losers.
I love that. Going after a massive, obvious trillion-dollar market on day one is a death sentence for a startup.
Why is it a death sentence?
Because if a market is obviously massive, it is already filled with massive apex predators. You are a minnow willingly jumping into an ocean filled with sharks.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
If you try to disrupt the global shipping industry on day one, you are going to war with Maersk and Amazon Logistics. They have infinite capital, entrenched political lobbying power, and armies of lawyers.
They will just crush you.
Exactly. They will bleed you dry in a war of attrition or simply underprice you until you go bankrupt. Aiming for a massive established market guarantees endless, brutal competition and absolutely zero pricing power.
So if the massive market is a trap, what's the alternative? How do you build $1 billion company without going after $1 billion market?
You utilize Thiel's monopoly strategy. It dictates the exact opposite approach. You must tactically search for a microscopic, hyper-niche, seemingly irrelevant market.
A tiny market.
Yes. A market so small that the massive incumbents don't even care it exists. You go into that tiny market and you completely ruthlessly dominate it.
Oh, I see.
You become a monopoly in a pond so small that no large predator would waste their energy trying to compete with you. And once you have established an absolute monopoly in that initial market, once you have captured 80 or 90% of the users only, then do you use that leverage to expand outward in concentric circles into adjacent markets?
I want to debate the nuance of this for a second, because the distinction between a small market and a dead market seems perilously thin to me.
It can be.
If I'm a founder and I decide to build software exclusively for left-handed dog groomers in the Pacific Northwest, sure, I can monopolize that market in a week. But VCs are going to laugh me out of the room because there's no billion-dollar trajectory there. How do you identify a micro market that actually has the kinetic energy to expand?
That is the critical distinction. A dead market is static. A strategically valuable micro market is one that is highly concentrated, deeply interconnected, and inherently adjacent to larger markets.
Adjacent to larger markets, right?
You are looking for a homogeneous group of people who talk to each other constantly and share a massive unaddressed pain point. Look at the historical examples.
Let's hear them.
Amazon did not start by trying to build the everything store to compete with Walmart. Jeff Bezos started exclusively maniacally focused on selling one single product: books.
Just books.
That was it. He monopolized the online book market, building his distribution infrastructure and customer trust without triggering the defense mechanisms of massive department stores. Only after monopolizing books did he expand to CDs, then DVDs, then electronics, and eventually cloud computing.
And Facebook is the ultimate example of this.
Okay.
In 2004, there were already massive social networks trying to conquer the world. Friendster, MySpace. Facebook didn't launch globally. They launched exclusively at Harvard University.
A tiny, tiny market.
Right. In fact, you literally could not get an account if you didn't possess a Harvard email address. They artificially constrained their market to a few thousand undergraduate students. But those students were highly concentrated, lived in the same dorms, and were obsessed with social status.
It was the perfect incubator.
They monopolized that single university campus within weeks. Then they expanded to the Ivy League. Then to all colleges. Then to high schools. Then to the world. They conquered the globe by starting with one dorm room.
Monopolizing a small niche flips the global economic dynamic entirely in favor of the startup. It allows you to define the category, it allows you to build deep fanatical brand loyalty, and it allows you to establish operational economies of scale on a micro level before anyone with real power realizes you are a legitimate threat.
It makes me think of the physical mechanics of building a campfire.
How so?
You don't start by pouring a gallon of lighter fluid, which in the startup world is expensive, paid marketing and advertising, onto a giant pile of cold, wet logs. If you do that, you will just get a massive flash of fire that burns out in 2 seconds, leaving the logs completely unburned.
Right, just flares up and dies.
To build a sustainable fire, you have to start small. You take dry kindling and you nurture a tiny white-hot coal. You blow on it. You protect it from the wind. That single coal is your small, obsessed user base in your micro-market. Only when that coal is burning with absolute self-sustaining intensity do you start adding larger logs and fueling the fire.
That is a highly accurate physical metaphor for the mechanism of PMF, but it forces us to confront the next logical question. How, practically speaking, do you create that initial white-hot coal?
Yeah, how do you get those first users?
How do you get those first 10 or 100 truly obsessed users who will form the foundation of your monopoly?
And the answer provided by the sources is almost laughably counterintuitive, especially in our current age of sophisticated algorithms, AI automation, and massive digital scale.
It really is.
You get those first users by doing things that fundamentally, structurally do not scale. We're talking about unscalable marketing and a level of extreme manual empathy that large corporations simply cannot replicate.
Yes. There's an amazing story from Adora Chung about this.
Oh, tell me.
She was running a startup focused on consumer shipping, trying to make the process of mailing packages easier. Now, the scalable way to get users is to run Facebook ads.
Right, just buy some digital ads.
But to get their very first users, the founders literally walked into a physical U.S. post office, found people standing in miserable 30-minute-long lines holding packages, pulled them out of the line, and had them use the startup's digital shipping product right there on the spot.
That is the absolute definition of an unscalable tactic. I mean, you obviously cannot build a billion-dollar publicly traded company by having your highly paid software engineers physically pulling random citizens out of a post office line. The math doesn't work.
No, it doesn't, but you can get your first 10 users that way. And the value of those first 10 users isn't the revenue they generate. The value is the high-fidelity feedback loop.
Ah, I see.
When you are standing next to a user as they use your app for the first time, you are bypassing the noise of the digital world. You are watching their physical reaction.
You can see what confuses them.
Exactly. You see exactly where their finger hesitates over a confusing button. You see where they furrow their brow. You see the exact moment the product actually solves their problem and they smile. You cannot get that level of granular emotional data from a Google Analytics dashboard.
You are doing manual, unscalable user testing disguised as customer acquisition. And this philosophy extends far beyond the initial sign-up. Kevin Hale, the founder of Wufoo, talks extensively about this in the context of customer support.
Oh, Kevin Hale's insights on this are incredible.
In the corporate world, customer support is viewed as a necessary evil. It is a cost center to be minimized. Companies use automated phone trees and outsourced call centers to deflect customers.
Press 1 for more options. We all hate it.
Right. But Hale argues that for a startup, customer support isn't a cost center. It is your single most effective marketing tool and product development mechanism. He points out a structural reality. Customer support requests literally sit in the spaces between your conversion steps.
That's a profound way to look at it.
Every single time someone gets confused trying to set up an account, or their credit card fails, or they don't understand a feature, they send a support ticket. They are literally raising their hand and saying, I am trying to give you money, but your product is preventing me from doing it. If you ignore that ticket, they leave, and your retention curve slopes to zero.
And to illustrate the profound importance of this, Hale brings in psychological research from an entirely different field. John Gottman's research on marriage and relationships.
Oh, wow. Marriage research.
Yeah. Gottman is famous for being able to watch a couple argue for 5 minutes and predict with terrifying accuracy whether they will get divorced.
That's kind of scary.
It is. And Gottman found that the #1 predictor of a relationship failing isn't explosive anger or arguing or even infidelity. The #1 predictor is stonewalling the act of one partner emotionally shutting down, withdrawing from the conversation, and simply ignoring the other person.
Because it just kills the communication.
It destroys the relationship because it signals a fundamental lack of respect and value. And Hale maps the psychological principle directly to business dynamics.
How does that map?
In a startup, stonewalling customer feedback, ignoring the support inbox, taking 3 days to reply, or sending an automated do not reply email is the business equivalent of stonewalling a spouse. It is the #1 predictor of user churn.
Think about the psychological sting of being a user who is frustrated, taking the time to write a detailed email about a bug, and instantly receiving a robotic automated reply from a no-reply email address. It tells the user, we do not care about you. You are just a row in our database.
Exactly. It's incredibly alienating.
Which means, in an era where massive trillion-dollar corporations are actively trying to remove humans from the loop with AI chatbots, and automated deflection, extreme, unscalable human empathy becomes the ultimate competitive moat.
It really does.
The structural advantage of a small startup is that the founder, the person who actually wrote the code, can personally reply to a frustrated user's support ticket at 3 in the morning.
Ooh.
A giant corporation, physically and legally, cannot do that.
They're too bound by process.
Exactly. When a user sends an angry email at midnight, gets a personalized, apologetic reply from the CEO 10 minutes later explaining that they just fixed the bug, that level of care breaks the user's brain.
It violates all their corporate expectations.
It turns a frustrated user into a fanatical, lifelong evangelist for your brand.
It creates a bond that a competitor cannot break with a cheaper price point. And understanding this completely exposes the pervasive PR fallacy that ruins so many early-stage companies.
Oh, let's talk about the PR fallacy.
So many founders believe that the key to unlocking massive growth is getting an article written about their startup in TechCrunch or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
Because that feels like making it.
Right. They hire expensive PR firms thinking that press coverage equals scalable permanent user acquisition. But the historical data shows that press is largely a vanity metric.
Really? Just vanity.
Yeah. It provides a massive one-time spike in web traffic. The founders get a temporary dopamine hit, their parents are proud of them, and then 3 days later, the traffic inevitably returns to the exact baseline it was at before.
So it doesn't stick.
Press cannot fix a leaky bucket. If your product doesn't have retention, pouring 1 million TechCrunch readers into it just creates 1 million churned users. Only extreme empathy and relentless product iteration can build the baseline.
But I have to push back here, because there is a logical breaking point to this philosophy. If I am manually writing custom code to make one enterprise client happy, or if I am spending 5 hours on the phone acting as a therapist for one single user, when does doing things that don't scale become structurally toxic?
That's the million-dollar question.
Aren't I just becoming a boutique consultancy at that point? How do I know when it's time to stop the unscalable behavior and actually build a scalable corporation?
That is the inherent tension of company building, and the sources provide a very specific mathematical and mental model to resolve it. It's called the rule of magnitude.
The rule of magnitude, okay?
The rule states that you should only ever worry about solving problems for the next order of magnitude.
What does that mean in practice?
When you have 10 users, you do absolutely whatever unscalable, absurd things are necessary to get to 100 users. You visit their houses, you manually enter their data, you reply to emails in 3 minutes.
Okay, so you hustle for that next zero.
Exactly. Once you reach 100 users, those original unscalable tactics will naturally and painfully start to break. You will stop sleeping. Things will fall through the cracks.
That sounds awful.
It is, but that pain is the signal. That is the exact moment you build the scalable systems, the automated onboarding, the CRM software, to get from 100 to 1,000 users.
Oh, I see. You don't build it until it hurts.
Right. The fatal mistake founders make is worrying about how their database architecture will handle 1 million users when they currently only have 10. You must let the operational pain of breaking systems dictate when it is time to scale. rather than prematurely optimizing for a future state of success that hasn't actually happened yet.
Okay, so we've covered massive ground here. We've talked about selling to the 2.5% of innovators. We've talked about navigating the 60 steps of a deal and avoiding the traps of feature creep. We've talked about the physics of monopolizing tiny markets to find product market fit and deploying unscalable empathy to keep those users from churning.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But there is one final arena we have to dissect. It is arguably the most high-stakes, structurally complex, and psychologically intense sale a founder will ever make. Selling a piece of their actual company to a venture capital investor.
The power dynamics in fundraising are incredibly delicate, ruthless, and often entirely misunderstood by the founders themselves.
Yeah, how do founders usually approach it?
Well, many founders walk into Sandhill Road feeling like supplicants begging for permission to exist. But mastering this environment begins with the fundamental ability to compress complex information and bypass the investor's cognitive filters.
They're pressed how?
Michael Siebel from Y Combinator outlines the architecture of the perfect 30-second pitch, and it is startlingly, almost aggressively simple.
3 sentences. That's the entire architecture.
Literally just 3 sentences.
Sentence 1, what do you do? And he stresses absolute zero jargon. Investors listen to 100 pitches a week. Their brains automatically filter out buzzwords. You do not say, we are a decentralized, paradigm-shifting, AI-driven marketplace for spatial utilization.
No, please don't say that.
You say, Airbnb lets you rent an extra room in your house to travelers. Simple, concrete, immediate.
That's perfect.
Sentence 2, how big is the market? Investors need to know that the mathematical ceiling of your industry is high enough to generate billions of dollars in enterprise value.
They need to see the scale.
And sentence 3, what is your traction or your speed of execution? We launched last month, we have 500 users, and we are growing 30% week over week.
Why does this specific 3-sentence structure work? Because it systematically disables the investor's instinct to tune you out. It proves you understand clarity, scale, and momentum.
So what happens after those 30 seconds?
If you earn their attention with those flawless 30 seconds, you unlock the right to deliver the 2-minute pitch. And this is where you introduce the critical element, the unique insight.
Unique insight.
You must tell the investor something fundamentally true about the world, or human behavior, or your specific industry that they do not already know. It is the aha moment that proves you have a secret structural advantage.
Okay, so you hit them with the insight.
Yes. You then layer in your business model, how you actually extract financial value, the composition of your team, and finally, the specific ask. How much money do you need? And exactly what milestones will that money buy?
But the pitch itself, the words you say, is just the surface layer of the interaction.
Right.
And the real game is played in the underlying power dynamics of the room.
Absolutely. The words are just the ante to get to the table.
Because let's be honest about the structural reality. When you are a founder sitting across from a venture capitalist asking them for $3 million, they theoretically hold all the power. They have the capital that will determine whether your company survives the year. You have a slide deck and a dream.
It's an incredibly lopsided dynamic.
So how do you possibly flip that script? How do you take the power back from an institution that manages billions of dollars?
The fundamental rule of leverage is this. You fundraise only when you are strong. The fatal, irrecoverable mistake founders make is approaching investors from a position of operational or financial desperation, saying, we have this truly great idea, but we can't actually start building it, or we can't acquire users until you give us permission and capital.
The investor has absolute, unmitigated leverage in that scenario.
Complete leverage. They can dictate the valuation, the board seats, and the terms because you have no alternative. You must flip the dynamic by presenting your company as a rapidly moving train.
A moving train.
You do not ask for permission. You go to them and say, we are already building this. We are acquiring users. We are growing 20% a month. This train is leaving the station and accelerating. You can either buy a ticket and get on board right now to share in the upside, or you can sit on the platform and get left behind.
It reminds me of the psychology of applying for a job, but amplified by millions of dollars. If you walk into a job interview acting desperate, checking your phone every 2 seconds, agreeing to every single demand, begging for the role because you need to pay rent, the hiring manager can smell the desperation in your sweat.
They absolutely can.
They will either reject you outright as a risk, or they will lowball your salary offer because they know you have no leverage. But imagine you walk into that exact same interview for the exact same job, but you act like you already have 3 other lucrative offers on the table.
Your posture changes completely.
You lean back, you ask them hard questions about company culture, you act like you were just there to evaluate if they are a good fit for your career trajectory. Suddenly, the dynamic inverts. The hiring manager panics that they're going to lose top talent, and they start throwing money and perks at you.
Confidence, backed by actual operational execution, literally alters the financial valuation of your company. It forces the investor into a defensive posture.
And this psychological posture is intimately connected to what elite venture capitalists are actually looking for when they evaluate risk. Mark Andreessen, one of the most successful VCs in history, explains a fascinating dichotomy in the industry.
Yes, Andreessen's framework here is crucial.
He notes that mediocre venture capitalists, the ones who generate average returns, look for lack of weakness. They operate like accountants with a checklist. Do they have a good team? Check. Is it a big market? Check. Is the product design nice? Check. They want a safe, well-rounded, polite company with no obvious flaws.
Right, they want straight-A students.
But elite VCs, the ones who generate massive fund-making returns, operate on a completely different paradigm. They do not care about a lack of weakness. They exclusively invest in extreme strength.
This concept completely blew my mind when I read it. Andreessen says they will intentionally, enthusiastically invest in a company that has glaring, terrifying, existential weaknesses as long as the company is a profound historical outlier in one specific dimension.
So they don't care if you're messy.
They don't care if your marketing plan is literally written on a napkin. They don't care if your financial projections are totally fabricated. They don't even care if the two co-founders occasionally yell at each other. As long as your core proprietary technology is light years ahead of anything else on Earth.
They are hunting for mutants.
Exactly. They are not looking for straight-A students who are good at everything. They are looking for savants who are world-class at one specific thing.
And we have to explain why this is true, because it's driven by the underlying mathematics of venture capital. Venture capital is not a game of incremental gains. It is a game of extreme power law outliers.
Right. The math demands it.
If a VC invests in a safe, well-rounded company with a lack of weakness, that company might succeed and yield a 2x or 3x return on capital. But a VC fund expects 80% of its investments to go to zero.
80%.
To cover those massive losses and generate a return for their limited partners, the winners cannot just be 2x returns. The winners must be 1,000x or 10,000x returns.
And a safe company will never generate a 10,000x return. Only a company with an extreme strength can conquer a global market.
Right.
If the startup survives its glaring weaknesses long enough for the extreme strength to compound, it becomes a Google or a Stripe. The VC is willing to fund the hiring of a new marketing team or a seasoned CEO later to fix the weaknesses. But you cannot fake or hire extreme mutant-level product strength.
Which perfectly frames how founders need to view the entire timeline of fundraising. You don't just raise money to throw a lavish launch party or buy custom hoodies for your team. The process of fundraising is fundamentally a mechanical mechanism of risk allocation. Raising capital is about sequentially peeling away layers of risk.
It's a very systematic way to look at it.
When you raise your initial seed money, the investors are taking on massive risk. They're giving you money to peel away product risk. Can this team actually write the code and build the physical thing they promised?
Right, and once you have built it, the product risk is gone. But now you have customer risk. Will anyone actually pay for it?
Exactly. So you raise a Series A round of funding specifically to peel away customer risk by building a sales team. You are sequentially buying down the systemic risk of failure at every stage. And as the risk decreases, the valuation of your company increases.
If we synthesize this with the broader concept of power dynamics, we have to look at the most potent weapon a founder has in a negotiation: the manipulation of time.
The manipulation of time.
Yes, this is the strategy of generating deal heat. Venture capitalists are analytical, but they are also deeply competitive and driven by FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Oh, they definitely are.
If a founder schedules one investor meeting a week for 2 months, the investors have all the time in the world to deliberate. They can do endless background checks. They can drag their feet. They can wait to see what other firms do.
Yeah.
In a protracted timeline, the investor holds all the power.
Because there's no urgency.
Exactly. But if a founder artificially compresses time, if they forcefully schedule 30 investor meetings with top-tier firms in a single grueling 5-day window, they create a psychological frenzy in the market.
You create the illusion. and the rapidly compounding reality of absolute scarcity.
Yes.
An investor hears through the grapevine that you are meeting with every top firm on Sand Hill Road this week. Suddenly, their analytical caution is overridden by their primal fear that their rival firm is going to steal the next billion-dollar outlier right out from under them.
You force them to abandon their slow due diligence process and make a decision quickly. You use time compression to completely reclaim your leverage. You force them to bid against each other, driving up your valuation and allowing you to dictate the terms.
It is a masterful, calculated application of structural force. You're actively using the psychological vulnerabilities of the investors, their intense competitive nature, and their existential fear of missing the next Google to fund your vision on your terms.
It really is an incredible dynamic to watch.
So let's pull all of these massive threads together. We've journeyed through a gauntlet today.
We really have.
We started with the gritty, deeply unglamorous reality of the lone founder making 400 cold calls and swallowing rejection just to find the 2.5% of innovators.
We decoded the counterintuitive psychology of shutting up and listening for 70% of a high-stakes sales pitch, and the operational discipline required to navigate 60 touchpoints without becoming annoying.
We explored the physics of monopolizing microscopic, seemingly irrelevant markets to achieve the systemic gravity of product-market fit, and the unscalable, extreme empathy required to keep those early users from churning.
And finally, we decoded the high-stakes theater of flipping the power dynamic on venture capitalists by hunting for extreme strength and manipulating time to generate deal heat.
When you look at all of these frameworks collectively, a core structural thread begins to emerge. It connects all of these seemingly disparate disciplines: sales, marketing, product development, and elite fundraising. And that thread is that true, unassailable power is always derived from extreme focus and intentional constraint.
Yes, constraint creates power.
Exactly. It's about refusing the temptation to be everything to everyone. Whether you are focusing strictly on the tiny 2.5% of innovators who might actually buy your unproven product,
Right.
whether you are purposefully monopolizing a tiny microscopic market instead of drowning in a massive trillion-dollar ocean,
Right.
whether you are forcefully constraining your own ego to shut up and listen for 70% of a sales call, or whether you are presenting one single blinding extreme strength to an investor while ignoring a dozen weaknesses. Intentional constraint is what creates your power.
By refusing to appeal to everyone, by refusing to be average across the board, you become utterly irresistible to the specific few who actually matter to your survival.
We started this deep dive talking about the seductive myth of the Don Draper salesman, the guy in the tailored gray suit who can effortlessly bend anyone to his will with a perfect hypnotic pitch. But the reality we've uncovered is far more demanding, far more mathematical, and frankly, far more interesting.
It's a lot more work, but it's real.
It requires sifting through massive amounts of dirt, embracing a 97% rejection rate as a statistical certainty, and willingly doing things that fundamentally do not scale.
Absolutely.
We spent all this time today analyzing how to maneuver through power dynamics. We've talked about how to close massive deals, win fanatical customers, and secure millions of dollars from investors by obsessively, relentlessly focusing on what they want, by mapping their specific pain points, fixing their workflows, and mitigating their financial risks.
It's all about them.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go back to building whatever it is you are building. If you spend all your time, your energy, and your intellect shifting your reality to solve the problems of your users, if you constantly alter your trajectory to satisfy the demands of your investors, at what point do you risk losing the original radical vision that made you want to start this journey in the first place?
That is the ultimate question.
Next time you find yourself desperately altering your pitch just to close a demanding enterprise deal, or tweaking your product roadmap to please an elite venture capitalist, pause and ask yourself, are you capturing the market? Or is the market capturing you?